here I'm with Mike Buckiewicz of Eligeo.ai. Today we're going to have a conversation about businesses and some of the challenges, concerns, questions, and things that are coming up in some of his conversations. So Eligeo.ai, I'm chairman of that company, a company I founded over 18 years ago. So Mike, I hired over 2.5 years ago to join our team. And now he runs the go-to-market strategies at Eligeo, and so he's hearing and seeing a lot of the things that are happening out there. So welcome, Mike, and thanks for taking some time to do a little video with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Excited to join whoever's watching today, and let's talk about it. Let's get into it.
Yeah. So exactly. Let's go right into some of the conversations that are happening. I've in the last 6 months since I've taken over as chairman of Eligeo, I've spent a lot of time talking to small business owners about the challenges and questions that they're having with AI. And it's not even usually starting out as AI, it's just it immediately goes there. So I'm curious, what are some of the things that you're experiencing as you're having conversations with customers today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, there's a lot of avenues that it always goes down, right? And it always comes back to one theme, and that is people don't really know where to get started. I mean, that's the bottom line. And the hype is definitely more fearful than anything of missing out. So we have to almost slow it down a bit. And one of the biggest things that I'm hearing right now is, the need for an agent, but they actually only need a workflow. And that difference is really hard for them to understand because they feel like they're getting behind, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody feels like it's moving fast. So one of the biggest conversations I think we always have is, well, the first things first. What are you trying to transform? Like, what are you trying to do? And that seems to get people stuck.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the hardest places we're at right now is you have to almost reimagine the business. You can't stick an agent in the middle of chaos and say, do work, right? It's kind of like, we went through this together, right? You stick somebody in the middle of something they don't understand, you're just going to get unrealistic results, and you're just going to feel like you're constantly fighting an uphill battle. But I mean, from your perspective too, honestly, from the people you're talking to in the higher levels, these bigger companies are struggling, right? They're struggling to adopt it. What are you hearing in terms of the aspect of how do I personally drive the adoption? I think that's the part that people are struggling with right now the most, and I think that's why a lot of these initiatives are failing.
Well, I think it's interesting. I think a lot of these initiatives are happening because of FOMO. Everyone's like, hey, my buddy's doing this at his company, I have to do this, and the reality is they don't have to do all this stuff right now. And examples that I give, I've done on other videos as well, is I've talked about how I've had companies come to me and say, I need an AI agent to solve this problem. And like, really, when you start understanding the problem, it has nothing to do with AI. They just need a workflow.
Exactly.
AI's created these conversations, which has been a good thing, but there's this FOMO that I think is going to end up costing businesses a lot of money and time and resources and all that when they're getting distracted from what they're really good at too.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I see all the time. So you have to kind of point them back and say, AI absolutely critical, but the reality is you need to actually have a good foundation.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people miss the foundational piece of what they need to actually put together. So are you seeing that a lot? Like it's the foundation, like they want you to come and throw an AI agent in there, but you haven't actually, they have systems that are scattered, they're not connected, they're not talking to each other. They might even be the wrong systems.
A ton. And I think that you hit it on the nose there. It's the foundation, right? But the thing is, a lot of them don't even know what that foundation is right now. And they're trying to corral and just try to, lasso almost all these things together and like tie it with a string. And you're going, guys, none of this is going to work together as you imagine it, right? And that's the one big struggle I think everybody has with the AI, imagining what it can be possible, because one of the struggles is if you're referencing chaos, it's going to generate said chaos right back to you. So if you ask it, hey, well, how's my P&L sheet looking like? But you have something over in QuickBooks, you have something else in a spreadsheet, and then you've got institutional knowledge in the heads of your employees. It's not going to come back with great results. It's just going to say what it can find, right? And it's just going to be confused. So you hit it spot on. The foundational piece is really the data, right? Where does your data live? How is it structured? Do you even understand where it's coming from? It's a hard thing to grasp. Once you kind of slow it down a bit and break it out, that conversation gets a lot more meaningful. And I agree with you. Like I had a client recently, we were working together on a very robust and complex workflow. Right? And I'll be honest with you, the platform we were helping them implement was answering the call, but not quite. And then I was on a site visit with them, talking with the individual that struggles every day to do a very manual process of uploading data. And I asked her, I just said, well, how much time are you spending on this? And she goes, well, probably 4 to 5 hours a day. And I said, just typing in data? That's insane. I said, what if that was automated and pushed in 20 minutes? And it was just a what if, and it was the outcome. And that's what changed the perspective. And that's what established what is now, I wouldn't call it an agent, it's more of a workflow, but it is starting to learn in the agentic sense of how does it read the data to extract it based upon how she did it. And she's training that agent now. So it's hard. You have to do little wins, right? You have to find those nuggets that create massive ROI to get that momentum to then start evolving, right? I think that's the hardest part within this just the fast-paced nature of where we're at right
now. Now, speaking of fast-paced nature, like thinking about Eligeo.ai, 6 months ago, it wasn't Eligeo.ai. Now it's Eligeo.ai because of exactly the shifts that are going on in the industry. So what are some of the things, Eligeo's recognized that needs to happen in order for us to continue to deliver, great service to the customers?
One of the biggest struggles we were having before we started utilizing and really intentionally applying AI was, how do we spread the knowledge base that we have to everyone and empower them with it? And I think that goes back to one of my favorite books that I just recently read again was Ethan Mollick's Co-Intelligence. And I've been following him for a long time because one of the things that he said that really resonated was you have to almost work with AI as a coworker, right? And that kind of inspired me to rethink how we were doing the business. And, about a year and a half ago, and I remember this discussion you and I had with Neil, and he was saying, well, how do we make Mike 2.0? And I said, we don't. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody, right? But at the same time, I was thinking, well, but he's on to something.
Yeah.
And the infrastructure wasn't quite there yet to implement what would be Mike AI as I was imagining it. Now it's that vision is here, and it's crazy. The evolution we've gone through just in the 90 days we've been doing this has been astronomical. Like our sales manager, our ops manager, all these folks are now accelerated, and they have the data to make that, make the decisions that we need to make in a fast-paced manner. But I think going back to your question, I think the real reason that we really made this huge shift and this committed shift, and that's a big important piece we can get into, is we knew it was necessary. It wasn't a choice. It wasn't a, like, oh, if we don't do this, we'll be okay. We know it had to happen. And so I think that commitment helped us really accelerate it and be able to, change the way we talk about it. So I'll give you an example. The first stab at an agent that I had was basically, how do I effectively structure a scoping mechanism, right? Like, how do we get to the client something consistent? And that's when it dawned on me. I was like, well, it's not an agent that does it itself. We need humans in the loop first. And just for level setting, human in the loop obviously is a human gate that it cannot pass until the human, in fact, either approves it, revises it, or whatever it might be. Now we're getting to a point where I'm even looking at this going, now we're going to be human on the loop, which is a whole nother capacity, right? You're just approving what it presents as getting better. Eventually, we're going to be hands off. But it's not going to be a,
So do people get worried about when you hear that though? Like, so this is another thing that people talk about, is that they're worried about their jobs. And I realize there's certainly great concern about that. And the way I look at it though is that the output's going to increase substantially, and we're going to need people in order to do that. And I've often referenced an example of a conference I went to where they went from 13 full-time employees down to 4 and a bunch of AI agents. But yeah, that company shrunk, but their output doubled. So now they have to hire more people, other businesses doing different roles in order to facilitate these bigger events because the output increased, right?
And you just hit it right there. It's the reinvention, right? It's going back to what I said about the reimagining the business. You can't keep people doing the same thing if you're going to augment it with AI. And I think that was one of the biggest struggles we had originally was, what are people actually going to be doing? And I think the biggest shift we had was, it's not that you need to cut a bunch of people. It's how do we repurpose the skill sets we have? And I think that's the biggest thing that that we had to kind of go through an exercise of was, okay, how do we reimagine our, the business process consultants that we have? What are they actually doing? What's the focus? And AI is going to be good, but it's not good enough to develop. And I appreciate what Kevin said the other day when we were talking about this, is the relationship building, the trust, establishing that connection, right? That human intervention is still going to be necessary.
Yep.
So that's the skill sets, the soft skills. And that's, if you listen to any thought leadership right now, one of the biggest things they keep going back to is the human element is going to be a lot more important right now than actually having those technical expertises or the focused expertise, kind of like the coding, the massive coding shift that's going on right now. We still need people to validate. It's not good enough yet to say, oh, it's good, we're moving on. You still have to interact. I mean, I'll ask you this: when you're going through even just the basics of what you've been playing with and understanding, what's the biggest finding you have every time related to the AI shift? Like, it's constantly changing, so like you have to evolve it. But like, how do you keep up with that? And how do you make sure that when you experiment with it, you're not just doing it just to experiment, right? There's actually, impact.
Well, the reality is, you can't keep up with it. It's kind of the absolute reality, and anyone that tells you otherwise is, I don't think they're telling the truth. That it is changing fast, and so I mean, everything every day is something new, something different. I do think people should try things. I had a client last week that I met with, and I advised them, they have an intern on staff. I said, just put them in Claude. Take a spreadsheet that you've been using manually to do something for the longest time. Just tell them to convert that into an app. It doesn't have to be production ready. Just see what's possible and just play around with it a bit. I think that's really important to kind of play around a bit. I think most businesses today are playing around with like ChatGPT or Gemini. I think Gemini by default, because you just go to Google search today and it's the first thing that pops up. But I think people are experimenting that way. And now it's the whole next levels that they need to get to. I think that's happening more and more. But I think that it's changing so quickly. Just a matter of picking a problem you want to solve and then actually starting to address it. So circling back, as far as the businesses themselves. So we talked about the FOMO part, but what about the other extreme where someone's like, I can get rid of everybody. I'm going to fire everybody, and I'm going to be like a 1 or 2 person shop. I'm going to replace 30 people, 40 people. I think that's crazy. I don't think it's realistic, but there are people out there that are kind of going to those extremes. Bigger companies have backpedaled on the whole AI's replacing. It's interesting how the big AI players, the frontier model players, are not even talking about the replacement of workers anymore. So what do you think? What do you say to people that think they should go to extremes like that? Because I think from a social side, there's the social aspect too. It's like, well, who's going to buy anything? You're going to blow up the economy. If they were able to do that. But I still think, to your point, there's still that human interaction piece. I don't know if I want to just be dealing with an AI or a robot or anything like that.
Even before AI, I always saw a job as it's always at risk, right? You're always constantly having to evolve.
Well, to that point, just as an example, like if you asked a farmer 100 years ago, I heard this quote several times. 100 years ago, you say, do you know what a physiotherapist is? Or a psychologist? They would look at you like you're crazy. A software developer, web designer, webmaster, they wouldn't have no idea what that is.
Exactly. And I think I think we're going through that next shift, that next evolution, right? And if you think about the .com boom, you think about even just basically the cell phone for that matter. When I was in high school, I still remember like when they had the Nokia bricks around, and I was just going, "No, this is silly. Why do you need one of those?" And then now it's a necessity, right?
Everybody has a brick in their volume. It might be smaller, thankfully, but yeah.
Yeah, but like going back to kind of the whole idea of like, well, hey, I can do everything. Sure. I'm not going to say it can't. But it's not going to benefit you to be alone trying to manage these agents. I mean, you got to think of an agent as almost an employee at that point. You got to say, okay, this agent is going to do my books, right? Or whatever you want to call it. And if you are constantly having to monitor it in a way where you're losing track of where it's at, you're basically just introducing risk to your business. And I think the reinvention of how humans interact with AI is going to be not, hey, your job is gone. It's, hey, you are now going to train the agent with us, right? You're going to monitor it. You're going to learn from it because it's going to pull things out you didn't even know existed. And that's our journey. That's exactly what started happening. I mean, I can't tell you that the agent we developed called Flocore, and it was an idea a year and a half ago of mine. And when I started developing it, one of the things I realized is we needed a way to measure sentiment. And it's such an art than it is a science, right? So I had to figure out a way that it would synthesize this information and move it into the world of how do we make it a measurable tactic.
Yeah.
When I got to the point of actual outcome, right, and I started looking at it, it's funny, the agent that I was working with basically read my mind. And I was like, okay, this is a little terrifying, right? Like I was like, or whatever. But the good news is that
this is a year and a half ago.
Yeah. Right? And mind you, when
Imagine having that conversation right now.
Oh God, it would
how far it's advanced, right?
The rabbit hole would be so much deeper. But the good news is that like I started seeing the results. It wasn't as accurate as it should have been. Like I was starting to see little nuances.
Yeah.
So I think what people need to understand, and I actually gave this guidance to somebody that I used to mentor. I said, if you're looking to reimagine your career, just like you need to reimagine a business, you have to evolve your thinking to how do I manage agents, or how do you don't necessarily need to know how to create them. You just need to know the basics. And I think that's where people get lost is if you're not at least on the adoption curve on the front end a little bit, and like you said, you just need to talk to them as if you're talking to a human, even though it's weird. I know.
I like the analogy, always treat them like an intern.
Exactly.
You hire an intern, clean slate. You don't just give them admin access on day one. Although I said that to a client recently, like, oops, we did that. An actual intern, not an AI, but it's funny how if you do boil it down like that, because when you're developing skills, it's really, building a standard operating procedures, right? So, but yeah, anyways, that was great. That was a great point. So I guess maybe let's just wrap it up on one last thing here. I'd love to know, as you're, the customer's ideal, the client's ideal with advising, what's like the number one thing you would tell them to start thinking about if they've only been doing like ChatGPT and all that? What's the number one thing they should start thinking about before, engaging, say a partner like Eligeo, to start taking those steps to, implement agents and things like that?
So I actually it'd be two things, honestly, and it's a pairing of one question, and that is, what are you actually good at? Because here's the thing, you can go solve problems with workflows, automation, whatnot. The problem is if you don't understand what you're actually solving for, then you're not going to solve the problem. Okay. So the first step I would say is what are you good at? How do you make it better with AI? That would be the first thing to think about. And the second thing is, what do you need out of your systems to be able to make it better? And that's the hardest question, because once you get into that conversation, you start uncovering other things like, oh, I need some of that. Oh, I need some of this. It gets into this point where you're just never going to know, but make it as simple as you can. I think everybody's saying that, and I don't want to sound cliche or anything, but make it simple. Say, okay, how can I save even just time? And I know time is measurable and all that stuff, but it's so, I would say, relatable when you can see the actual result and say, oh, I see what it did there, and then you start building off of it. So I think that if I were to put it two very simple things, what are you good at? Yeah. Let's enhance it. Number two, what do you need out of it? Right?
Okay. Excellent. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Appreciate you taking some time to do this.
Yeah.
Of course, we're in Calgary doing our leadership retreats, so I get the privilege of hanging out with all the amazing people at Eligeo. So if you like these kinds of stories, these kinds of conversations, there's more on the YouTube channel, so certainly subscribe to hear more, and we'll see you again next time.